The word Blackberry goes by many meanings in the technology community. Some see it as nothing more than a paperweight, some see it as a smartphone for professionals because of its keyboard, some see it as the first real smartphone, and a growing number of people are most likely just as aware of what a Blackberry is as they are with floppy disks and Clippy. To me though, the Blackberry represents an incredible idea for its time, but unfortunately only for its time. After all, how could a tech company raise a $20 billion net worth overnight and just as quickly drop to a 0% market share? That's the enigma of Blackberry. In 1984, a small company in Waterloo, Canada, Research in Motion, was formed by Mike Lazaridis and Douglas Fragan, both engineering students with the intent of selling a product they called Budgie, which allowed 4 lines of text to be entered in a keyboard and then wirelessly displayed on a TV set. The idea was that retailers would use the system to make advertisements. Unsurprisingly, Budgie ended up being a failure, but it marked the start of a long series of experimental products, like film editing equipment, a barcode reader, an electric toothbrush, and even equipment to use the Mobitex network, or as we know it today, first-generation mobile data. RIM's work with the Mobitex network eventually led to some hardware that took advantage of it, like a PCM-CIA modem, and eventually a pager. For those who are unaware, a pager is basically the simplest form of texting before texting was a thing. They relied on wireless data networks like Mobitex to send text messages, or in the case of RIM's interactive pager, send faxes, text-to-speech messages on the phone, and even emails through the information superhighway. The more successful RIM 950 came out 2 years later, and soon after, the RIM 957, with a larger screen that began the iconic design for BlackBerry products that followed. The name BlackBerry actually originated from the keyboard on this device. The angled design of the keys, which made it easier to type with your thumbs, kind of looked like the drupelets of a BlackBerry fruit. Part of the success of BlackBerry was due to its widespread support from business workers and executives, which was built through their guerrilla marketing techniques. Taking a page from the AOL playbook, RIM would send teams to conferences and airports who would seek out people with heavy-looking laptops and modems. They would give the person a BlackBerry to try free for a month, and because of how many were being given out, some used their free BlackBerries for years. It didn't matter much, however, because once people got a free trial of the technology, they were hooked, and their word of mouth carried the brand the rest of the way into profitability. The BlackBerry may have started out as a pager, but the brand transitioned with the release of the BlackBerry 5810, RIM's first true smartphone. Of course you had to plug in a headset to make calls, but by the BlackBerry 6710, audio hardware was included too. With the introduction of a color screen in the 7200 and a continually improving design, the BlackBerry became closer and closer to what we know it as today. For the longest time, BlackBerry had been focused towards the business community, and it had seen great success in that area, being dubbed the CrackBerry because of how addicted people would become to their phones. But just as RIM had transitioned from pagers to smartphones, they started looking at introducing the BlackBerry to the general public. The redesign, introduction of a model name instead of a number, and new included features on the BlackBerry Pearl like a built-in camera and media playback demonstrated RIM's attempts to make the BlackBerry a cool item. Both the Pearl and the Curve, released in 2007, rapidly increased sales of BlackBerry phones, but another smartphone released that year marked a new threat to the BlackBerry brand. The iPhone was radically different from the BlackBerries it competed with. It had mobile data, text messaging, and phone calls, but no keypad. Instead, the face of the device was a touchscreen, and if this seems like an obvious move to you, then that just shows how popular the idea was. After the iPhone, the technology industry became obsessed with touch interfaces, to the point where it's hard to find a smartphone today that doesn't have one. Despite its massive public attention, Lazaridis was skeptical of the iPhone. After all, it was the first time Apple had entered the cell phone market, and he believed the cell networks wouldn't even be able to handle the device. And for a while, he was right. For about 2 years after its release, the iPhone was infamous for slow cellular data and dropped calls that culminated in a class action lawsuit against the company. RIM was confident that with over 10 million users, Apple's iPhone wouldn't offer too much competition. Still, they went with the touchscreen idea and released the BlackBerry Storm to less than great reception. It was panned for being glitchy, slow, and not even having support for Wi-Fi. The BlackBerry Bold, however, which stuck to the traditional BlackBerry formula, ended up doing very well, bringing the company to its peak value in 2008 at £49 billion. Still, the rise of the iPhone and eventually Android was inevitable. By the iPhone 3GS, Apple was beginning to outsell BlackBerry devices. It didn't help that the Storm 2, which sought to patch all of the issues consumers had with the Storm, released the same day as the Motorola Droid, a phone with much more media hype. Following this rapid loss in market share, RIM decided to completely revamp the BlackBerry operating system, a requiring smaller companies to rewrite the OS and develop an interface for the first and only BlackBerry tablet, the Playbook. I say only because the device was a total flop, selling over the course of its lifetime 2.5 million units, a number the original iPad had surpassed within 3 months. 2012 brought much needed change to RIM, however, from the departure of Lazaridis and Balsillie, to the introduction of Thorsten Heinz, who cut thousands of jobs, to the delay of the promised new OS, BlackBerry 10, to early 2013. At BlackBerry 10's release, RIM also announced that it would be renamed to BlackBerry. Not really a huge deal. I guess they were just taking a few cards from AOL in its quote-unquote rebranding. After incidents like a 3-day service outage in 2009, however, customer faith had eroded in BlackBerry to the point where many consumers had left for Android and iPhone. It wouldn't be persuaded back. Following declined offers to sell the company later that year, Heinz was replaced with the current BlackBerry CEO, John Chen. Chen had a history of turning around failing companies, and some of the first changes he made to BlackBerry were to move focus back towards the professional fields where BlackBerry had originally been successful. Under Chen's leadership, the company also released its first Android-based phone, the BlackBerry Priv, in 2015, eventually ditching BlackBerry 10 entirely by early 2016. Towards the end of the year, BlackBerry announced that it would no longer be developing hardware in-house, instead working on software for smartphones. While BlackBerry phones are still produced by TCL, the company's 0% market share essentially means that BlackBerry phones aren't likely to make a comeback. And there you have it, yet another story of how a company can pioneer an industry only to end up failing when they can't keep up with the market they created. BlackBerry was a game changer when it came to getting the public to use smartphones, but proved to move too slowly when change came from outside sources. Perhaps, though, it isn't entirely BlackBerry's fault. After all, when you have a product gaining 4 million users in 1 quarter, it's hard to acknowledge that some comparatively crummy product released by a company with no experience in your industry is going to eclipse your success in less than a decade. RIM had taken steps to compete with the iPhone, but overall they had underestimated the risk it posed. Perhaps if the BlackBerry Storm had been given more developmental attention and had a more successful release, we might all be watching this video on our new BlackBerry phones, with the Apple iPhone being as much of a footnote in tech history as the Newton.